I'm interested to know how you made the transition from sort of the institutionalized teaching profession to something a little more open and balanced, maybe. I'm hoping to hear from
Oh my
you.
gosh, yes. I won't say the transition was very balanced though. It was, um, yeah, I just quit out of like overwhelm and stress. And I guess going into where was I? So it was after college, and I had gotten a full-time teaching job in Texas, and I was teaching high school science. And I had done other teaching before. I'd been tutoring my sister and her friends. I had been an assistant teacher at Sunday school. I had done tutoring, and in college, I taught some student taught courses and small group things. I taught English and Greece. So I knew I liked a lot of the teaching. And then when I got my, I guess, first job, full-time role as a public school teacher, yeah, just honestly felt awful most of the time that I was doing it. And um, I think a part of it was maturity, and then part of it was just like structuring myself and that maybe the overstimulation and organization required in a classroom. And so many of my previous settings had been just like small group and one-on-one. So I was like, I know I like the teaching, but then, to have like 200 kids, to have no textbooks, to say like we need to have pencils, like I just didn't have that, I guess, awareness or authority to enjoy the large classroom process.
Yeah, I I relate to a lot of that. I mean, my own teaching, I think it took me at least 3 to 5 years before I could really say, oh, I feel good about this. And then the pandemic hit. And I still love teaching. But I think the piece that you said that really landed with me was the overstimulation that I mean, there's no other job that I can imagine where you are constantly bombarded at a level that if you're somebody who cares about other people is wholly overwhelming and sometimes just really devastating.
I so appreciate you saying that. I remember trying to convince myself to like ignore certain students or to focus like on the middle. And I was like, I just can't do this. I
Mhm.
can't just treat this like as an institution, and like I can't attend at the level that I want to each person here.
Yeah, I've had some pretty intense conversations with other colleagues of mine post-pandemic, especially of just about how the system is not set up to actually produce this sort of, I think, learners or, people coming out of this that maybe you or I want. And so you have this impression that you're gonna be the solution.
Oh,
You do more and more and more, and the system never really changes. And so you just end up burning yourself out.
mhm.
And I think that's kind of like where I am. And that's why when I heard about what you've been doing, I was really interested to find out more.
Yeah. Oh, I remember, gosh, I just remember how overwhelmed and disappointed I felt. And then what you said too about teaching, I knew I wanted to teach. When people were saying, oh, it's not for everyone, or like, good thing you realized it earlier. I was like, no, like I'm not actually just giving up on this thing. It isn't what I can handle or what's like gonna work for me right now. So I really wanted to find another way that was a natural fit. So after I left the school, I mean, I was in my like early 20s. My like mom came out and helped me like move out of my apartment, and just I was in this really um I don't know, really lost place. And so was unemployed for a bit, was also just trying to figure out work and career and like adulthood at the same time. And what did I do? I ended up working like in retail. And then I guess the shorter like version of the story is I like met someone when I was working in retail who then like hired me at the bank across the street. And then from there, I got a little more like stability, but I was like, and it was kind of fun to like be that character, at the bank. But I was like, this is not like fully me. I want to go back into education. And so I then met someone and we moved across the country together. And I was like, this is an opportunity to change my role into something that I am excited about. And so I moved from Boston to Silicon Valley. And at the time I was like, oh, maybe like ed tech is like a thing, but I think I like sent like a few resumes, but like didn't really pursue it. And then honestly, I saw an ad online for tutoring and I was like, oh, well, this is fun. Like, I just know that I'm going to enjoy this. And so I submitted my resume and had the interview and just remember walking out of it feeling like, oh, like I'm really good at this. And these people were really fun to talk to. And so I was like, I hope they choose me, but if they don't choose me, then like I know this is the right direction and I'm not going to stay in like the fields that I was in. And they did choose me. And I then worked as a tutor at the company. And now I'm a director at the company. So I still tutor actually part-time, like 10 to 20 hours a week. And then I support the office and train the tutors and talk to parents and just have a nice, as you mentioned earlier, a balance where I get to enjoy the attention and relationships with my students. But it's not the same system and structure that was not nourishing for my soul at the time. And it's been about 10 years actually that since I started it. And one of the things I think that's also made it sustainable is the some of the flexibility too. Like I've been able to have other projects. Like I got my master's degree actually during it as a counseling psychology in holistic counseling psychology, and then I did an internship as a therapist, and then I worked at a pottery shop, and so it's felt really just good for my creative flow.
Yeah, it sounds like it opened up a lot of things for you. I often feel like when I went into teaching, I think one of the things I was, crowing about to everybody, because it took me, I was 30 when I finally went into it, but I think like you, dabbled in it in a lot of other ways. I'd worked with teenagers in theater. I had worked as a teaching assistant with students with special needs. I tutored. I had this idea of what I thought it was going to be, and in my mind, I was like, "This is one of the most creative disciplines you can have," and I really believed that about it. And then once I ended up with, as you said, over 120 students, it was like, well, there's no time for that.
Yeah, I was just trying to keep it together. I would like collect assignments and then I didn't even like end up correcting them because I was like, I don't even have time. I didn't make the new like
Yeah.
plan for it. I was so
Yeah.
just trying to keep the basics in order so that when I showed up, they would, I don't know, feel some sense of like structure and learning. But yeah.
And do you have a coaching program too that you run?
Yeah. So I also run a business as an ADHD career coach. And so that's usually actually around this time in the mornings. I do, yeah, mostly virtual sessions, but I do some in person as well. And that came from some of what did it come from? Um, Partly my own experience. I've noticed the traits in myself. And when I was going through the master's program, I was like, oh, this is how ADHD shows up in women. I'm like, oh, these are all the strategies that I apply myself. And then I learned it ran in my family. And then when I was working as a therapist, I noticed my ADHD clients were the ones I like clicked best with, but I didn't really want to focus on like I guess the history, the trauma piece. And I was like, oh no, I want to do the like career aspect because I had felt like I had made this change into something that really worked for me. And yeah. Oh yeah. And a lot of my students also had ADHD over the years too. And that was kind of coming up as something I was learning how to work with well. And I was like, oh, let's see if I can show up with what I've learned and what my skills are to help people. And I then found out that a lot of adult women are diagnosed later when their kids are diagnosed. And so it's a great like
Yeah.
natural niche.
That resonates with me a lot. And just as a teacher, just the prevalence of ADHD in the classroom, but really noticing how it does hit differently with boys. and girls, and the real, I don't want to say that girls fall through the cracks, but they kind of do. Like they're kind of left
Yeah.
us alone with a
Yeah.
lot. I'm curious to know just from you, what do you feel like at the age of say like 15 or so, like
Mhm.
what out for girls with ADHD?
Oh man, I'm like, I could make a whole conversation about this. I actually just had a conversation like this week with about that age. And I had been noticing for a while, really it's primarily a high level of attention. So um, they're just noticing so much in their like surroundings and making quick connections that it be hard to focus that attention on one thing if there are other things going on around them, which then can lead to things like careless mistakes or feeling maybe overstimulated and overwhelmed, having difficulty structuring, oh, study a little bit every day instead of just the night before. And as I think of my own study habits, like I got A's. There was enough structure in place, and like high performance. I mean, you know where I went to high school. And so like I think for me that was good. And I was also still at home at the time. I wasn't a boarding student. So like having that wasn't something I had to put into place. So, and it was interesting when I mentioned it to the student, I was like, do I want to bring this up? I just feel like there are so many, and I guess one of the other things too is like, oh, I just feel like the way I'm presenting this and teaching this is like clicking for you. Like we're thinking about this in a very similar way. And she was also very artsy. There's like color coding sometimes and appreciation for aesthetics. Uh, and I asked like, oh, I don't remember how I brought it up, but I just mentioned like, have you heard of ADHD or does anyone in your family have it? And she's like, oh yeah, my brother. It was like brought up when he was a kid, but not for me because the boys often, I don't know why, if it's like they actually are more hyperactive or there's more energy or they're just socially allowed more to like, climb on chairs in the classroom and be active and, being the good, organized, perfectionist, anxious girl. Oh yeah, it presents as anxiety so often. I'd say almost all of my clients who got their ADHD diagnosis in their 30s and been diagnosed prior with anxiety. And it's like, well, no wonder you're gonna have anxiety if your nervous system and your sensitivity feels like this.
Yeah, totally, totally. I also wonder too, I just as a teacher and just noticing not just the ways that students present themselves, but the way that students behave towards me.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm at the point where I'll observe it and then call it out when it's happening,
Mhm.
like that there's this sort of acceptance of boys, being, like you said, not just hyperactive, but talking out of turn of, and I just think it's so interesting how much we internalize. And I wonder to what extent, the different manifestations of boys and girls ADHD is actually conditioned, that like girls don't do these things because it's already been like taken out, put off limits in some
That's very
way.
interesting. Yeah. The like self-control, what's acceptable piece.
It totally.
The social awareness, right? Of like, this is what is like right. And this, yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I just think that that's really interesting. When I saw that you did that, I thought that's such a great, um, I don't want to say service, that's not the right word, but like such a great niche to find, because I think it's really real. And like with myself, I've thought a lot about, I mean, I definitely know that I'm a very good teacher one-on-one. And I'm a good teacher generally, but in one-on-one, obviously, I feel like that's where the reward really comes in. And
Mhm.
um I've thought about, what do I really, really enjoy doing? And that's coaching writing.
Oh,
I've thought about trying to
I just made a book a couple weeks ago and I'm in kind of the production process and I have a blog. Oh man, this is so great. I'm excited that we've met.